You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Challenge us at Wexford Insurances 0818 31 30 30.
Joining me now in studio is Rory Clayton, an international retail consultant with David Dalton and Associates. Rory, you started your career in the Army. What did you learn from this experience and how did it impact your future career?
I learned very quickly in the Army that it's not the organisations that fail, it's the people within it. And if you direct and organise people in a different way, you improve organisations. And that's probably one of the driving forces in my life, working with people to improve environments.
So after the Army, what did you do?
Okay, so I had a deep and abiding interest in people. I was leaving the Army in my mid to late 40s. I needed to get a second career going. And I thought, what do I know and what am I good at? And I thought, I'm good at reshaping organisations and improving them by working on the people to change their practices and behaviours.
So tell me about some of the projects that you've worked on over the years.
All right, well, I was very lucky when I left. I had this basic idea about improving operations through people. So I took that to Saatchi & Saatchi, the advertising agency, and they sponsored me for a year, paid me a salary while I developed my ideas, and then got me into some really big clients like Procter & Gamble, Hewlett-Packard. I did a lot of projects for them, JP Morgan, the investment bank. But all of them were linked by a common cause, that they were in rapidly changing circumstances as an organisation and needed to get their people to adapt into and move in different ways to improve delivery of products and services to their customers. And I turned out I had a natural ability, an intuitive ability in that area.
So talk me through that process.
When I go to an organisation, I analyse it in terms of how it's performing. I wouldn't be there if it was performing well or it didn't have a problem. When I touch it for the first time, I just go in and sense the mood and sense the atmosphere and watch how it relates to the people it's meant to be serving. I then ask the people in the organisation how they feel about it, what they like about it, what they don't like. I ask them what environments they actually like or prefer to operate in. And I stitch all that information together into a picture, basically the culture of the operation I'm working with. And I draw a line, quite literally on a piece of paper. And above the line, I put all the plus points, and below the line, I put all the negative points. And having looked at that map of negativity in terms of whatever it is I've been asked to do, I say, how does that hold back the organisation in terms of its objectives? And then I strategise all that. I basically put in a plan to remove the negativity through working with the people on the organisation to achieve objectives.
So you take the internal viewpoint first. Tell me about some of the external factors that you look at.
Okay, I look at the environment in which organisations operate because I have a understanding of ergonomics, how an organisation works, and vectronics, how it works in relation to the machines that people use in an organisation. I look at it in terms of the environment in which it sits. Is it an ideal environment? Does it promote accessibility? Is it an attractive environment? Does it promote in people a desire to connect with it? When they come into the environment, what is, in my words, what's the opportunity cost? How many barriers are there put in the way of somebody, for instance, walking to a shop to acquire a bottle of wine? They have an idea of what they want to buy. Is that clearly signposted? When they get to the bottle, can they find it quickly? Is it priced in a way which says I can afford that or I can't afford it? If it's priced in a way they can afford, can they quickly go to a till, quickly pay for it and exit because people have the need for speed? If they walk into a shop, can't find the bottle, when they do find the bottle, it's not priced, so they find out what the price is, it turns out they can't afford it, so therefore exit the shop. Or when they do find the bottle, they can't find an assistant to serve them. When they do find the assistant to serve them, the till process is very slow and it all goes wrong because it wasn't listed on the till roll. All these are barriers, what I call a high level of opportunity cost. So I found also, when it comes to the interaction between an organisation and its customers, look at the opportunity cost. What are the barriers to the transaction being closed and make the opportunity cost as low as possible? It makes a massively improved organisation and a hugely improved organisation in terms of its success.
So in reality, Rory, what you're doing is you're simplifying the buying process from that perspective. Now, you're currently working on a project with Green Acres in Wexford Town. Tell me how that came about and what the objective of the project is.
All right. Well, all businesses evolve over a period of time. Green Acres in Wexford started off in what is now Boots in the High Street, moved from there to its current environment. A business which has grown successfully, but organically, but very much in the image of its managing director, James O'Connor. He has an interest in food, he has an interest in wine, interested in art, by evolution, interest in a restaurant, interest in a shop selling stuff around the food and wine area. But because it had grown organically, many of the elements of that business have become inextricably entwined with each other. And from a customer perspective, very difficult to define exactly what Green Acres stood for. James knew that, and knew that if he wanted to expand and grow the brand of Green Acres, i.e. take it to other cities in Ireland, for instance, he had to get the business model right here in Wexford. So initially he got my business partner, David Dalton from Dalton Associates, to come and do some business analysis, look at how the business was running, where the costs sat, where the benefits were. He then went forward from that and looked at other areas of the business and decided within the midst of that that he needed to get a retail environment psychologist in, me, to actually have a look at it. So, as a result, I got into a discussion with James as the managing director of the business to look at the business in terms of repositioning it and preparing it for the next stage of growth. So I set up a 3-month project. Month 1 was come in, analyse and put in place a diagnosis. What was right, what was wrong. Taking the diagnosis, sell our diagnosis to James, i.e. this is what you need to do. Month 2, design what we need to do and basically reconstruct the business. And month 3, put that into effect, implement and operationalise it. And that's what we've done. And fundamentally what we did was, listen, your business is confused here. When people come into as a customer, they're not quite sure when they walk into the restaurant, whether they're walking to the shop, when they walk into the shop, whether they're walking to the restaurant. And between the two of them, they're certainly confused when it comes to accessing the gallery upstairs, as it were. So we separated all of that out and said, what do we need to have for an optimum restaurant, and what does that look like? What do we need to have for an optimum shop, and what does that look like? Let's design it. And that's what we did.
I'd like to have a chat to you now about Wexford Town Inc. So to look at the town itself and to look through your lens as a retail expert. What are your thoughts on the town?
Okay, so I touched on that earlier and said, the success of a business is very important in terms of the environment in which it sits. And Wexford is very fortunate. It's an incredibly pretty seaside town. Lots of traditional narrow streets. You look above what I call the streetscape, look above first level, look up at these buildings, and they're beautiful. But in many ways, we're not maximising our advantage here in terms of a destination. So our shop signage is very patchy and in some ways not relevant and lacks design and integrity and doesn't have a coordinated approach. And it's off-putting visually. In other areas, we've allowed some parts of the town to actually become quite down its heel and tatty. A couple of buildings look as, in all truth, to be a bit blunt, they look as though they're used sometimes as a public urinal for the late-night pub traffic and never cleaned up. And I'm surprised at that, I have to say. In other areas, when I look at the town, having these immensely pretty buildings, we've got too many buildings which are allowed to decay and nobody is held to account, and the council doesn't intervene to actually spruce them up and smarten them up. Because I'm very mindful that in all environmental delivery and planning, if you want to attract people, the environment to which you want to attract them has in itself got to be attractive and look presentable and be an engaging and indeed beautiful place to walk through. Wexford has its natural charms, but there is no coordinated approach to actually ensuring that its natural charms are enhanced and maintained by working with the very people who own the buildings which create Wexford and intrinsically deliver its beauty. And so my big message here would be get real and start working with the owners of those buildings and start looking at the streetscape in terms of a visitor here and say as they walk through, are they going to look at this and say this is a vigorous, young, happy, thriving, beautiful, well-presented town? Or are they going to say this is just another victim of the recession in Ireland and looking a bit down at the hill where clearly people are being overwhelmed by what's going on and actually have lost the will to live? All of these town centres are litmus papers of commercial health, and we're neglecting them in favour of out-of-town developments. Great to have the out-of-town development, but make sure when that development turns up that for 5 years at least of its first 5 years of life, it has to fund the rates and the rent of a city centre property for someone else. That would make them think twice about putting in place their out-of-town development and destroying our town centres, but also create a commercial opportunity to maintain and sustain a vibrant high street, which is a key part in maintaining and building the health of communities.
Some very valid points made there, Rory. I am also conscious of the fact that I don't have somebody on the programme this morning from the local authority to defend themselves. But in their defence, I would say that the local authority have put huge investment into the town centre over the last number of years.
Everything I hear about your local authority, I have to say, impresses me. And I walk round the town and I can see where they've acted, and it's a question of very well done, and they've done an awful lot of good. I look at Salzburg Square, for instance. What a great bit of sort of, urban architecture that is, and I look at that nice new roundabout that sits on the one of the approaches into Wexford, and I think that's great too. But they could do an awful lot more. There's clearly a streak of innovation. I hear you've got a very good county manager in place. I think, I bumped into him on one occasion. And I find a lot of what I hear about your council to be very refreshing and very innovative. But I think they could be a shining beacon in the maintenance and sustainability of the urban Irish high street community. And there are some very simple things they can move ahead with now, given the good work they've done so far, which would actually move them into the top league, and they should do that pretty quickly, because that's what Wexford deserves.
Now, I'd like to have a quick chat to you as well in relation to the retailer that's operating within any of the towns across the county, from Enniscorthy to Wexford to New Ross and Bunclody and Gorey. Let's say, for instance, you were in the mind of a business owner out there today, a retailer that's struggling financially, that has cash flow issues, that's finding it hard to meet its debt repayments. What would you do?
Okay, the key of all this has always been the same. I find most people who are struggling don't know where to turn, and they're trying to tackle everything, but in no particular or prioritised order. So the key has always been planning. It's very trite to say it, but if you sit down and look at the entirety and then organise things in a priority order and say what needs to be done first, what needs to be done simultaneously, and what can wait and be put on the long finger, that goes an enormous way to start putting in place a plan which allows you to manage. You cannot manage a difficult situation without planning. The second thing you need to do is to share the issue. I find far too many business owners hold the chaos of a declining commercial environment deep within their heart and their head, and don't engage the rest of the team. Even if the team is only one other person they've got working in their business, share the problem, sit and discuss it, and at least be unified and joint in your actions, and make sure that all the actions you take are adding value to the business and not detracting. Far too many owners just don't do that. And I suppose the last point I would make is make sure that the service or product you're delivering has relevance to the market you're delivering it into, and that people know about it. And if it's not, cut and run and close down and start and go and do something else.
You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Think Wexford Insurances for your business insurance.